A more mature Desean Jackson, says John McMullen. As he joins us down the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. A more mature Desean Jackson, John. What evidence did you see from Desean that makes you feel that he is more mature this time around?
Well, he mentioned himself about some of the off-the-field stuff, some of the partying when he was younger, and talking about you can do that and sort of wake up and go out and play when you're a young man. He's now 32. He's got a wife. He's got a family. He's got some aches and pains and has kind of realized that you got to prepare a little bit better. You got to understand the maintenance of your body, and had a great quote about cheetahs don't need to stretch. That's how he felt like when he was younger. And he did that. When he would come out to practice the first time he was here, he's not one of those guys. Like, if you go to an Eagles practice now, you'll see Jason Peters, who's 37 years old, obviously has been through the wars, had a lot of injuries. He'll spend 15, 20 minutes just getting ready for practice, stretching out his body. Desean wasn't like that. A lot of young players aren't like that. But he's kind of grown up a little bit, understands he needs to take care of himself a little bit better. So I thought that was a positive. I thought him acknowledging some of the off-field stuff was a positive. And he also mentioned he wanted to sort of start to mentor some of the younger players, as Brian Westbrook and others did when he got here. And I think that was a positive as well. So certainly a different sort of personality today than when he was here 5 years ago. But it's also, he's aware the eyeballs are on him. And this is his reintroductory press conference. So he said all the right things, and we'll have to see if he follows through with them.
Yeah, no, I think the one big question that I think I would have, I like the signing, John. I think he's a skill set that they need. We've talked about, will he accept this role? That is the biggest question. Is Desean Jackson going to be accepting of, hey, I'm not going to get 6 catches a game, you're not going to throw me the ball 6 times? Is he going to be accepting of, I'm going to get 2 targets, but I got to make the most of those 2?
Yeah, I mentioned that yesterday on the show. That's my biggest concern as well. I think, if you go back to the silly gang stuff and how he left the organization, I think that's overblown. I think that was an attempt to vilify him on the way out the door. That kind of stuff is not as big to me as the fact that, before Chip Kelly ever got here, I think people forget he would complain when he didn't get the football. And that's been the one consistent theme. It's hardly the only receiver. I mean, we all know so many diva-like receivers in this league. Terrell Owens would be the best indication of that here. They all want the football. They all complain when they don't get the football. He's in that camp. He's one of those guys. Now, the question is, does he realize he's in a different part of his career? When he left here, he was coming off 80-plus catches, 1,300 yards, the Pro Bowl. He was the number 1 guy. And now he comes back, and at best, he's the number 3 guy behind Zach Ertz and Alshon Jeffrey. So that, to me, is the biggest question.
In some games, possibly Aguilar. In some games, possibly Aguilar.
Yeah, well, I doubt that, but that's another question for Nelson Aguilar, because all of a sudden he's number 4 on the pecking order. And then you sort of, on paper, it's an embarrassment of riches for Doug Peterson, but it's easy to look at things on paper and play fantasy football. You got to keep everybody happy. And it goes even further down, because there's going to be a lot of people who saw Dallas Goedert at the end of last season and have advocated for him to get more playing time and for the Eagles to play more 12 personnel versus 11, 3 receivers. Well, I got news for you. if Alshon and Desean and Nelson are on the field, Dallas Goedert's not going to be on the field. And so there's going to be a lot of people unhappy with that.
Yeah, the one thing that you talk about, he's got all these choices, at least to me anyway, see if you agree, a lot of them have different skill sets. Like they all definitively do different things, whereas last year you had a lot of, Jordan Matthews, Nelson Aguilar, and Golden Tate. The three of them were at their best doing the same thing.
Yeah, much better fit this time around, and that's the thing. They've been looking for a speed receiver basically since Desean left the first time. They haven't been able to do it. There's been different levels. They were able to win a Super Bowl with Torrey Smith, but let's be honest, he wasn't very effective at that role. It got even worse after the Mike Wallace injury last year. So they've been looking for this trait for a long time. Desean can certainly provide it. And then you have the domino effect from there. Nelson Aguilar, who's not very good on the outside, is good on the inside. He can go back to the slot. Golden Tate's not going to be here, so you don't have that redundancy. And Jordan Matthews probably isn't going to be here either. Although, I just mentioned the Goddard effect there. I mean, would you rather have Jordan Matthews for, say, a veteran minimum deal rather than pay Nelson Aguilar $9.4 million and maybe open up some more space to play Dallas Goedert? Those are questions the Eagles needed to answer. They made the answer. They're going to carry Nelson Aguilar, and they're going to play a lot of 11 personnel. And that's what Doug prefers, so it's probably the right decision.
Yeah.
That's what he wants to do. That's what he feels comfortable with, and now he has the pieces to play it as much as he would like to play.
I'm interested to see what Tate ends up getting on the open market, because I'll ask you, if you could have moved on from Aguilar and re-signed Tate at a cheaper price, or do you think he'll get more than the 9.5?
Well, I did not think they were going to bring back Nelson at 9.4. That's his number on the option after they traded for Desean Jackson. They ultimately decided to. It wasn't that I didn't think they were going to bring him back. I thought they were going to bring him back, but just with an extension to lower that number. So they've gone heavy as far as assets under the cap at the receiver position, and they like Nelson Aguilar. That was evident by last year. I mean,
they went out of his way. They went out of their way to try to keep him happy.
Yeah, he's a sensitive guy. I'll be honest about that. We got into it personally because I wrote about Golden Tate being a better player. But from the Eagles' standpoint,
how does he approach that? Like, how does he call you out on that?
Walked right up to me. Said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "What are you talking about, Nelson?" And he just lit into me.
Wow.
I said, Golden should be playing. No, but we made up. It wasn't, But it's an indication. Look, you kind of walk a tightrope in this job from our perspective, because you have to write about players and then you have to talk to those players. And sometimes when those players don't perform that well, you got to write things that they didn't perform well, and people don't like that, and that's just part of it. But usually they handle it differently, and people say, well, who cares? What does he know? That's the majority of players handle it. But Nelson is very, very sensitive. I mean, he is. But and I kind of told him, I said, give you a little behind the scenes. I said, what do you care? The coaching staff doesn't agree with me. I mean, it was evident that they preferred, after they got Golden Tate in here, it was evident that Doug Peterson decided after about 3 or 4 weeks that he preferred Nelson Aguilar, and he had more playing time. And now I think it's better for him, because with Tate here, when Tate was in the slot, they kicked Nelson Aguilar outside, and that's not what he does well. But he does do, he is a good player from the slot, and now that Sean is here, he can play in the slot. So I think it helps him.
Interesting. And now, did he talk at all about? I listened to some of the press conference. I didn't get a chance to listen to all of it, but I didn't catch if anybody asked him about leaving here. Like, did he have any hard feelings, or did he, was he ticked off about how it all ended?
Yeah, he took the high road. He did get asked that, and we all know it was Chip Kelly, and it was all Chip Kelly fueled. Didn't want him here. Because of his personality. And in the past, he has made it very clear he doesn't like Chip Kelly, Desean. And that's part of the maturity as well. In the past, he's called him things like a weirdo in public. And today he took the high road and said, that's, sort of in the background, and you got to move forward. Now he's got a chance to sort of recapture his legacy in the city, which was going to be a really, really good one until he departed. So he was not happy at the time. There's no question about that. He's been on the record numerous times criticizing Chip Kelly, but today Chip Kelly's not here. He is. And he's always had a good relationship with Howie Roseman. So from that standpoint, it's all positive. And if it wasn't a change in regime, he wouldn't be here. So I don't think it's all that relevant, because if Chip was somehow still here, he wouldn't want Desean, and we wouldn't be in this situation. So it's completely different people.
Yeah, no doubt. And I did hear him say that he thanked, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman. It seems that he and Howie have a pretty good relationship, and there has been some thought of that if Howie was in charge back then, that Desean never would have been out of here, which kind of suggested if you're a guy who believes in Howie Roseman, you should believe in the fact that he's bringing him back here because he still thinks that he can play and help this team out at a high level.
Yeah, well, you should believe in Howie Roseman, but
doesn't mean he gets 100% of them right.
Well, nobody gets 100% of them right, but I think from the moment he stepped back into this job after Chip left, I think that's why you should have confidence in Howie Roseman. More than and some people have intimated, look, Howie doesn't like Chip as well now. I mean, obviously that wasn't always the case, but he lost. It's no secret he lost a battle with Chip Kelly at one time, and he was essentially exiled. So some people brought up the fact that he tries to undo everything Chip did, and I tweeted about that. I said I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I do think. There's a little extra smile, maybe, when something that Chip did didn't work out. He could fix it. You hope that had nothing to do with his evaluation of Desean Jackson. I don't think it did, but I do think it gives Howie a little bit extra oomph to be able to sort of stick it to Chip again.
Yeah, and that first, in the first or second play when the Eagles played Tampa this year, 75-yard touchdown. Deshaun's been sticking it to the Eagles. I think your colleague there, Reuben Frank over at NBC Philly, tweeted out, Desean has the most 50-yard touchdowns for the Eagles. He also has the most 50-yard touchdowns against the Eagles.
Yeah, he always loved playing the Eagles twice a year in Washington. And as you mentioned, even in Tampa, he always got a little bit extra up for Philadelphia. And I think that lesson after Chip left, it really is as simple as Desean didn't like Chip and vice versa. And as far as why he left here and why he had such angst against the Eagles when he was with the Redskins. So, again, once Chip is outside the organization, he liked a lot of people here. He liked a lot of the other people here that are still here. So I don't think that part of it, his exit, is all that relevant anymore. Now it's just a matter of you do have a guy, and as I said, this preceded Chip. A guy who complained when he didn't get the football enough. And that has been consistent throughout his career. When Andy Reid was here, when Chip was here, when he left and went to Washington, when he was in Tampa Bay. At times he has complained when he feels he isn't getting the football enough.
Which is like most high-level wide receivers.
Yes, you're right, and a lot of them. And you deal with it when you have a star receiver. My only question with that is he's no longer here. I don't really even have an issue with that when you're talking about your best receiver and you're talking about the guy who's supposed to get the most traffic. But now with this team, as it's currently constructed, he's coming into an offense where he's not supposed to get the most targets. So then it can become an issue, and that would be my largest concern. And really my only two concerns are that and the age at 32.
Well,
we know the history of players that age in this league.
Yeah.
At that position, the descent is going to come. It's just a matter of when.
I want you to listen to this bite from this morning. Dan Orlovsky, former NFL quarterback, said this about the addition of Desean Jackson. Take a listen.
Desean Jackson to the Eagles is a big deal. This is a guy that, even in the midst of a bad year last year with the team, almost averaged 20 yards per catch. And I go back to the combination of what is Carson Wentz. One of his strengths is throwing the football down the field. Desean Jackson, such a deep threat. This makes the Eagles, to me, one of, if not the best team in the NFC, or the team to go beat in the NFC.
One of, if not the best team in the NFC because of this addition. Would you concur?
Well, I would concur, but I thought they were one of or the best team in the NFC before the addition. So, I mean, I just think it made them a little bit better on the offensive side of the football. I mean, I'm in the camp where, you know, Doug Peterson recently said that if Alshon Jeffrey doesn't drop the football, he thinks the Eagles were going to a second straight Super Bowl. I agree with him. I think they win the game. I think they beat the Rams. And I think they go to the Super Bowl again. So already, to me, this was a very good team. Had a number of injury issues last year. They're stacked up front on both sides of the football. And that, to me, is the reason they're already in the conversation to being a contender on the NFC side again before and now after Desean Jackson. I think what Deshaun does is, I mentioned, it makes them a more well-rounded offense. It gets them the traits that Doug Peterson needs to run what he wants to run. So I think it makes them better, but I thought they were already there before they got him.
Tell us a little bit about, for the people who say, I read 97.3 ESPN.com, I see L.J. Fort. Is this a guy who's going to be playing? Is he a spare part, a special teams guy?
Well, he's a very good special teams player. So number one, you have that. They need a linebacker after losing Jordan Hicks. These are the kind of signings we just talked about. Howie Roseman. If you think about Howie Roseman 2.0, these are the type of signings where he has sort of differentiated himself from most of the general managers in this league. Whether you want to bring up Chris Long or the LeGarrette Blunts or Patrick Robinson, Stephen Wisniewski, signings like that that turn out to be impactful. Not great players, but very key contributors. I think L.J. Fort is in that conversation. You don't hit on all of these. Remember, they tried to do it last year with Corey Nelson, which didn't work at all. Paul Warlow, who got hurt. So I think it would have worked, to be honest, with Paul Warlow, but he got injured. And he'll have an opportunity because the Eagles need linebackers. But remember, they play a lot of sub packages on defense. They play a lot of nickel, a lot of dime, or big nickel with Malcolm Jenkins essentially playing linebacker. So Nigel Brad's going to be the only three-down linebacker, and from there you fill in. And Camus Grugier-Hale is going to be in the conversation. Paul Warlow is going to be back. He's going to be in the conversation. And LJ is going to be in that conversation. So he's going to get an opportunity to contribute. But if you're talking about on the defensive side of the football, he might be a starter, and I put that in quotations. People think of the three linebackers as starters, but you're probably looking at a guy who would play maybe 30% of the snaps and be an excellent special teams player.
We kind of went through pick 25 just to throw things out there and say, what positions would be in play at pick 25? We come up with defensive line, running back, or secondary. Do you add or subtract any of those?
Well, I still think defensive line is most likely just because of how many defensive linemen there will be available and how he's called it a historic class on the defensive line. Running back I don't think is in the equation simply because there's only one guy who would be worthy of being picked there, and he's not going to make it to 25. So you're going to have to trade up if you wanted Josh Jacobs. I do think corner is always in the conversation for every team in this league, to be honest, because you can never have enough corners. So that, to me, safety, they need a third safety, but I don't know if they want to spend – we talk about valuation all the time. I don't know if they want to spend a pick there on a safety, but they can certainly use one of those. And then you talk about some of the other positions and specifically where this team likes to build, and it's up front. We just talked about the defensive line. If there's a good offensive lineman there, remember, Jason Peters is 37 years old. There's no guarantee Jordan Mailata is going to be a player in this league. They could use an heir apparent at tackle. And even inside, Jason Kelsey, at least intimated retirement if they didn't give him some more guaranteed money. Brandon Brooks is coming off the Achilles. You can never have enough good offensive linemen in a league that doesn't have a lot of good offensive linemen. So I would throw that in the equation as well.
By the way, Bears signed Clinton Dix to a one-year deal. It wasn't a very big deal. He was a guy that got traded last year. Golden Tate traded. Neither one of those guys made a massive impact, so those trades seemingly didn't work out all that much for those teams. So Clinton Dix heading to Chicago with the Bears. Real quick, Jay Ajayi looks like he's going to work out with the Colts. That makes some sense with Frank Reich there, I guess. And Ronald Darby is in Kansas City?
Yeah, Ronald's in Kansas City, and I wouldn't be surprised if he signed there if the medical check out. I think that's the big concern with him. It's going to be very difficult. I still think his number is going to be pretty large. We'll see. It's definitely not going to be as large as some people speculated, and I think because of those injuries. That was the hope from the Eagles' perspective, is maybe his number would get to a position where they could stay involved and keep him. But ultimately, I don't think that's going to happen. And we talk about running back all the time. Obviously, Tevin Coleman didn't get anything from San Francisco, essentially. It was published as a 2-year deal for $10 million, but essentially it's 1 year for $3.5 million. So the Eagles could have had him if they wanted him. It was evident they didn't care. So they need to find a running back. They can do it in the draft. There's guys in the second, third round, potentially. There's the trade market. Jordan Howard, obviously, Joe Douglas has a history with him. The year he was out in Chicago, Duke Johnson, we talked about in the past. The Jets obviously signed Le'Veon Bell, so had to release Kroll. So there are plenty of options out there. What probably isn't out there is a 3-down running back. And, it's sort of been the Eagles' white whale. They can't get him. They wanted Christian McCaffrey. They wanted Dalvin Cook. And they just can't get one.
Yeah. Well, how about the trade market is out there, and we know Howie can get pretty creative maybe on draft day.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's anybody. Wrote about that, I think, last week. When you talk about the big names and the Antonio Browns and the Bells, and everybody throws, and the Eagles, when they talk about teams interested. And that's why, because Howie's always willing to pick up the phone and at least talk he offered a second-round pick for Antonio Brown, but the Eagles wouldn't redo the contract. So they were in on Brown.
Interesting.
And that's what the Eagles do. If it makes sense for them, they will leap.
He's John McMullen. Every day we do football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at JFMcMullen. Over 15,000 people listened to one of our conversations the other day. That kind of scares me.
It's always, come on, they're always big numbers.
Big time.
I think it's got more. I think it's got more to do with the Eagles than me, but I'll take credit for it. I don't mind.
We'll do it again tomorrow. Take care, pal.
All right, thanks, Mike.
John McMullen, all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.